chord. Shalom, Erev Tov, good evening from Jerusalem, Israel. This is Lowell Joseph Gallen, founder of the Root and Branch Association Limited, established in New York State in God of Israel Bless America in 1981, now celebrating our 40th anniversary. I would like to welcome our viewers and listeners worldwide and our live Zoom studio audience to this evening's program in our Root and Branch Association Limited English Language Conference and Lecture Series, broadcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. And now celebrating the start of our second quarter century. As I always do at the beginning of each program, I thank the wonderful institution and people who hosted our first quarter century from January 1995 through December 2020, the Orthodox Union Israel Center at 22 Karen Hayesad Street in Jerusalem, and the Orthodox Union Israel Center's wonderful educational director emeritus and founder and editor-in-chief emeritus of its remarkable Torah Tidbits publication, Mr. Phil Chernovsky, his Eshet Chayil Woman of Valor, Mrs. Tony Chernovsky, and the long-suffering Mrs. Itter Rachel Russick, the scheduler who keeps the whole place running without having a nervous breakdown. I would have burned out long ago. I don't know how she does it, but she does. Thanks to all of you. Today is Monday, June 7th, 2021 in the Gregorian calendar, and it is the 24th day of Sivan 5781 in the Hebrew Israelite calendar. We always like to give historic context where we are. Please remember, never forget, on May 19th, 1943, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising ended. And on June 5th, 1967, 2 days ago, the first day of the Six-Day War of the State of Israel here. And on June 6th, 1944, British and American and Allied forces landed at D-Day on Omaha and other beaches to liberate France and Europe from the Nazis. So we remember that. We are broadcasting from the land of Israel, city of God, Jerusalem, hill of the priests, Givat Hanania, Abu Tur, overlooking Mount Moriah, where we believe that the third and final Israelite temple of Jerusalem will soon be under reconstruction and stand forever, as per the prophet Ezekiel. Please see the biblical book of Ezekiel, chapters 40 through 48. The Root and Branch Association promotes faith in the God of Israel, who is the creator of us all. For the nations to honor and observe his Noahide covenant and laws, please see Genesis chapter 9. And for the nations and for us to honor his land, Torah, and people covenants with his chosen people, Israel. Now, our speaker for this evening's program is the chairman for the program. This is our first monthly seminar on Greek Jewry through the ages, hosted by our favorite Zorba the Jew, Professor Asher Matathias. And now, without further ado, now wait a minute, it's under $5 is a vase, over $5 is a vase. So a Jew, is that over? I have to check that. Is Dr. Les Glassman is going to introduce Professor Matathias, except I see that Les is on the road and I don't, let me see if he can do.
Yeah, I'm here. No, I'm here.
You're there.
I'm here.
Okay, Les, here we go. I'm giving you, it's your turn. So
Okay.
Go ahead. Let me cancel the spotlight video, and that's your turn. Go ahead, Les.
Okay. Lowell, thank you so much. And I just want to mention, Prof. Asher Matathias is an integral part of the Root and Branch since the very first time that you joined our show that Lowell's put together. And it's really has been the most incredible and unbelievable honor and a privilege to have you, Prof. You've contributed in every single show so much of your insights and your understanding of Jewish affairs, world affairs, and it really is, it's a treat. And it is so incredibly wonderful to have you as part of our root and branch. So I'm just going to give a very short bio because hopefully I think in the next month, you're going to be giving a Zoom session where you're going to explain your origins as a Holocaust survivor in the cave in Greece. It's fascinating. I've heard parts of it. I want to hear the whole thing from the beginning till the end. So that we wait with great anticipation for our next Zoom session, where we really are, where we cannot wait, and we intend to hear the roots and how you survived as a Holocaust survivor. But you are indeed a Holocaust survivor of Greek Jewry, and you came to the States, and you're assistant professor of American government, having taught for 55 years in middle, high school, and college. You're the president of the 5 towns of the B'nai Brit Lodge. You're a speaker for Holocaust education and tolerance at the Center of Glen Cove, Long Island. You're a writer, a contributor, as we know ourselves, a frequent public speaker. You're married to Anna following a 13-day courtship. I thought mine was good because after 3 weeks we got engaged, but you beat us by a long, I mean, yours was only 13 days. But you've been married for 51 years, the Ein Hara, and you're the father of 3 very proud daughters and the grandfather to 7 grandchildren. Can Yerbu, please God, there'll be many more. Anyway, it is it's the greatest honor and privilege to introduce you, and we wait with an eager anticipation to your presentation tonight. So without any further ado, our esteemed speaker, Prof. Asher Matathias. Thank you.
Thank you, Les. You bring tears to my eyes because I like to meet this person that you described so reticently. Very well. Really, you don't know how deeply appreciative I am, and even grateful. My wife is bringing me the coffee. So grateful to be associated with you. For yesterday was our first anniversary, first month anniversary of our start of talking about Greek Jews. I began, of course, a few months before with the introduction by our dear friend, Dr. Yitzhak Kerem, and the rest is history. I would be amiss to not mention in the list of important dates that Lowell so eloquently outlined that today, in that 6-day war, today, June 7th, was the reunification, the taking of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, our eternal capital, the one that for generations and millennia we have been praying for. And while I will extend my remarks next month about our origin, our family's origin, I must mention in honor and in memory that every time I speak about the Greek Jews, to mention our maternal grandparents of blessed memory, Daniel and Rachel, the one Rachel that my sister is named after, from Salonika, who along with our their two teenage sons, Shabbatai and Jake, had the misfortune of being rounded up from Salonika to die in the gas chambers of and crematoria of Auschwitz and Birkenau. I say this with all my heart, with all my emotion, because I must have survived to, for some reason, in the great unknown of our the Almighty. And perhaps this is one way to serve the Almighty, by remembering our parents and grandparents. Our parents left us in America a few years back, And every year, every day in my Shacharit prayers, when I enunciate the 18 blessings, I also add a 19th blessing, and that is to them directly for having the courage and the perseverance and the inspiration to bring us to America while they were in their mid-30s to start life anew in a new country. I appreciate that. I also want to say that our talk today is made possible through the stimulation that I received in preparing it. That is from the perspective of the Romagnol Sephardic Jewish perspective of my own, of the very fraught war of independence that took place in Greece in 1821. Elias Koucheris of Abolos Daily, Magnesia, called me up and said, Professor, as we are preparing, that was months ago, as we are preparing for March 25th, 2021, which is the bicentennial of that uprising, would you mind, would you grace us with your own perspective? And being of a man of few words and very shy, I proceeded to give him a bit of my mind in very extensive several pages. I do not know where those pages are, but I know that I have to share that with all of you today. Special shout out goes to the Jews who made the study of Jewish lives matter a priority. Jewish lives matter, and that is Greek and Greek Jews who have found themselves around the world, who nonetheless have focused on Greek Jewry, and to a large extent. And I am the recipient of their insights. I know that this is not exhaustive list, but I want to give special kavod in alphabetical order to Steve Bauman, to Paul Haguel, to Yitzhak Karem, to Devin Nahar, to Mina Rosen of the University of Haifa, and Leon Saltiel of Salonika. I say this because there is a depressing dearth of intellectual movement among Greeks, non-Jewish Greeks, historians, civil society. They do not focus on Greco-Jewish relations. They're deficient. And I hope, and most of all, of course, there is the 800-pound gorilla in any room that contains non-Jewish and Jewish Greeks. And that is, of course, the role of the Greek Orthodox Church that posits that Jews are responsible for the crucifixion and do not, and somehow, even though they use King David's Psalms in their matins every morning, there is room to refer to the perfidious Jews, and to on Holy Week to refer to have such things as the burning of Judas in effigy, and of course the crucifixion, the deicide charge. Still, I remain very hopeful, and I will tell you exactly. Because within the archdiocese of the Orthodox Church in America, they are welcoming reformist currents that are taking place. I want to mention the soon to be retired, next month will be retiring, Father Alex Carluchos, a wonderful man who always has encouraged me to think that change will come even on that doctrinal impasse. Lately, Father Nicholas Kazarian, who is also in the Archdiocese, who sent me several links to wonderful, wonderful academic exchanges in panels among some of the more progressive Orthodox priests and theologians, especially under the chairmanship of Father John Trisavies, who sat with the American Jewish Committee's Rabbi Noam Marans, whom I know very well, and who is the father, the son of our late and sainted, really a wonderful man for many decades, the spiritual leader of the Sephardic temple in Syracuse, where, by the way, in his earlier days in Brooklyn, I served as his teenage cantor. Can you imagine that? But for the grace of God, I might have turned out to be a cantor after all. At any rate, all of that is said, and above it all is His Eminence Archbishop Elpidoforos, a new archbishop. By the way, the name Elpidoforos means a carrier of hope. So naturally, I remain hopeful that a change is coming. I hope it doesn't take until very long. It only took 2,000 years to 2 millennia for the anti-Semitism to be embedded in Greece. It has taken 70 years for the Honorable Colonel Frizis, Mordechai Frizis, who fell in the Albanian front, to be recognized in 2010 in his home city of Kharkiv. The monument to the Holocaust monument in Thessaloniki was not erected. Can you imagine that? It was not erected until 2014. And of course, needless to say that there have been numerous attacks on Jewish cemeteries, synagogues, and Holocaust memorials throughout the past year and before. It would be nice if we can have the Greek state show an interest in reestablishing, in rebuilding, as now is taking place, the historic synagogue of Larissa. And it would be nice if we can have more forward movement in the wonderful former mayor of Salonika, Yanis Boutaris, himself sworn in to his second term, wearing the Magen David emblem, who is shepherding a Holocaust, not memorial, but an educational and tolerance center in Thessaloniki. And the irony is that today's Aristotle University is built on land that was expropriated from the Jews, where they buried their dead. They're dead. Can you imagine that the stones were removed in order to have a new Aristotle University? And of course, I must mention my own Volos Metropolitan Ignatios, whom I had the pleasure of meeting in recent years. Here we go. I don't know if you can see him. Can you see this? This is a most wonderful, wonderful metropolitan who stands in distinct difference from the very, very hateful, unfortunately, and embarrassing to Greece and Greeks everywhere, metropolitans. That I call it the unholy trinity of Ambrosius of Calabrita, Anthimus of Salonika, and Seraphim of Piraeus. The three of them have used repeated tropes against Jews, repeating the stereotypes of global conspiracy, of Soros, of Rothschilds. You know the drill. The banking industry, and somehow the overall control by 13 million or 14 or even 15 million Jews worldwide, control of everything that goes on in the world today. If that is so, they look at me and they think of me as the Mossad representative. They think of me as a kind of agent, if not of the Mossad, because I'm in America. The CIA must have gotten to me. I say all of that in spite of the fact to remove that stain and substitute with some wonderful. I mentioned the wonderful clerics in the Orthodox Archdiocese and Church at large, but I also want to mention a few others. I want to mention can you imagine an evangelical Protestant pastor, Matathias, with whom I have struck a wonderful friendship, and we collaborate on many things of note to bring Christians and Jews together in understanding and appreciating and respecting diversity and in dignity. We cannot have cooperation and collaboration unless we do that. The other person I'd like to mention is Professor Dimitris Benekos, who has authored a bilingual biography of here is the odd thing in life, of the German consul Helmut Scheffel, who during wartime in Volos, he came to to Chief Rabbi Pesach, Moshe Pesach, and to the metropolitan of the area to warn them to please collaborate and cooperate in spiriting away the Jews of Volos to the mountains. And that happened. That's where I will pick up next month. And I also want to mention Zakinos Cohen, who is from Volos. He is a Greek government operative, a very rare situation that a Greek Jew has a government portfolio. I suggest that more has to be done by the Greek government and Greek society to solicit the participation in government lists, in party lists for elective office of the many talented people that we find in the fewer than 5,000 remaining Greek Jews. All of that is said as I prepare to enter the main scope of my remarks about the Greek Revolution of 1821. This happens, of course, every 200 years. That's why it's called a bicentennial. And I hope by the next bicentennial, all the things that I have outlined that need to be done to improve Greek society would have taken place, including, by the way, the recognition finally after 73 years that Greek diplomacy erred fundamentally in 1947 in Resolution 181 by voting, being the only Christian and Christian and European country to vote against the establishment, the birth of a Jewish state. Isn't it time after 73 years for them to chalk this up to an error and apologize, withdraw, repudiate the vote, apologize to Israel and the Jewish people everywhere? That's what would make me very proud to be affiliated and to be connected to Greece and say, I am a proud Greek, Romagnot, Sephardic Jew, American, and Zorba the Jew. The epoch of 1821 indicated that there was a time for the waves, that were coming to from Western Europe of the Reformation and the Renaissance and the and nationalism. It was coming now. It was filtering to the southeastern Greece, southeastern European mass. I must tell you that Turkey, Ottoman Turks, represented one of those polyethnic empires, like the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and it was most tolerant to the many minorities, including the Jewish minority and even the Greek minority. In fact, when the declaration was made for independence, it coincided with the Christian Orthodox Feast of Annunciation, March 25th, because they wanted to connect it to some kind of spiritual or the blessing from up on high, similar to what the Jews did or experienced with the original Exodus. After all, the original Exodus is the manifestation of independence, of the first national independence movement. And so it did. As a Greek Jew, taking such a broad perspective makes us all understand that the Greek breakthrough, initially reviving a unified, much truncated modern Hellas. So eventually, the small state that became the modern Greece was Peloponnese and a little bit of Attica. Incidentally, many Greeks opposed the revolution. In fact, they had it they had a nice life with the Turks. And when when it was thought that the Greeks might get a foothold of independence, many Greeks left to go to Ottoman Empire holdings, including Jews. But unfortunately for Jews, not before 5,000 of them were slaughtered by the Greeks, in just as they were slaughtering the Ottomans, the Turks. You can understand to some extent that there were pent up hatreds and the desire for vengeance after more than 400 years of Turkish rule. But it also goes to tell you that that even in our own American Revolution, the revolt was not generally backed. It is estimated that only about 20% of the American people supported the breakup from the breakup with the British Empire. But those 20%, of course, were the creme de la creme of American society that were able to persuade eventually the majority to come along. The Greek Revolution incorporated many of the ideas of course, the Americans, and even more perhaps popular because it was more easily understood, the simple ideas of fraternity, equality, and liberté. However, when Napoleon Bonaparte tried to export those ideas, he met head on with nationalism and the resistance So the same thing happened in the Greek Revolution. I want you to know that the Greeks had the support of Albanians and of Vlachs and of Serbs and of Bulgarians, a whole medley of nationalities. Why? Because they too wanted their own little pie of independence, their own independent nation, but they did not want Greek dominance in the church. So what do you have? You have a mushrooming of Orthodox churches. There is the Bulgarian church, there's the Serbian church, there's the Greek church, there is the Ukrainian church, there is, of course, the most reactionary Russian church. So don't be surprised if the label fatherland, language, history are associated with Greek independence. It was meant to be exclusive. And they also talk, as they do, as modern Greeks continue to do, about the purity of blood. I hear this being talked about, and I confront some of them on the air. One station, can you imagine, has the call letters of Hellas, which is rather embarrassing when you tune in and understand what they're about. Very, very nationalistic, very extreme, very nativist. And so I confronted him and said, you talk about blood? You know that the last person who tried to purify his country cost the world 50 million lives. And of course, I'm referring to the Führer. Greece was isolated, but it did have the support of the Filikia Teria, the friendly brotherhood, and it had the support of Americans and Europeans, including, of course, Lord Byron, the archetype of Philhellene, because they had the notion that they were reviving ancient Greece. Today's Greece, even 200 years ago, the Greece that was revived had nothing to do with, except tangentially, with ancient Greece. This became a very exclusive, very Greece for Greek Christians, if I may say so. It was the label, it was the slogan of the junta in 1967 when they took over in Greece. Their slogan was, we want to get rid of foreign influences. By foreign, they also included Jewish influences and American influences. Greece, it would be for the Greek Christians. So in 1970, as I was descending on the airport called Ellinikon in those days, today it's called Eleftherios Venizelos, after what they considered to be a hero. But when Jews study Eleftherios Venizelos, it turns out to be a villain and an anti-Semite through and through. But leaving that aside, as I was descending, I looked at the grass, and on the grass it was printed, very well manicured, Elas Elinon Christianon, Greece for Greek Christians. And I began to wonder, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? But that is also something that has to be reckoned with eventually. The Greek population in the 1820s was woefully immature, ill-prepared for self-rule, and with having to deal with internal strife. Indeed, by 1830, when the Greeks finally managed, after 9 years of struggle, to be recognized as an independent country, they put in as the first magistrate Ioannis Kapodistrias, a former foreign minister of the Tsar of Russia, only to have him assassinated. And of course, when we talk about democracy, the longest period of democracy in Greece is right now, is being lived as we speak, from 1974, when the kernels were overturned, until today. But Greece did not, in 200 years, enjoy democracy. It did, there were spurs of that, but mainly it was unstable in political terms, in revolutions, in assassinations, and just abject poverty. Greece was poor. In 1912, of course, Greece acquired Macedonia. And of course, that included the big prize, the jewel of the Ottoman Empire in Salonika. And there were tears of resistance not physical or political, but emotional, by this Jewish metropolis that was dominant in the Jewish population. There were also, of course, a influx of Muslims and of Christians. They did not wish to go to a Greek sovereignty. And don't you think that the Eleftherios Venizelos pointed to this development and said, you see, Jews are not to be trusted. They're disloyal. Of course, they were not disloyal. They knew what they had under the Turks, and they fear what they will get under the Greeks. Were they wrong? Well, history is hardly encouraging in that score. David, there is a man I put down in my research. I came across a fellow, Florentine. David Florentine was a very big Zionist of the time in Salonika, who and knew Theodore Herzl and was part of the movement to get Jews to Palestine. And he suggested, and it was thought feasible at one level, that Salonika become an international city, just like Tangiers, just like Hong Kong, maybe the old Hong Kong, maybe the revived Hong Kong, Danzig in Poland, something that could incorporate all the minorities and have them coexist, even though under the nominal control of the new Greek state. Okay. A friend of mine, a very dear friend, a professor, and Dr. Demosthenes Rediafilou, was inspired to write a poem in an hymn to the heroes of 1821, and he writes, again, the allusion to religion, to the Virgin, and to other Christological meanings. It's Yortitis Panagias. It's a holiday for the Virgin. It began Archises στην Ελλάδα μας, ο αγώνας της ελευθερίας. It started in Greece. It is the struggle for liberty. With the sword στο χέρι and with the courage to in our hearts, we are unbending sons of Greece. We hit the Turks in the waters and in the mainland. And And in our country, irtisti patrida masksana eleftheria, came our freedom. Today, our schools, our heroes are honored. Names who will be will not be forgotten. Rigas Fereos, Kalitera mia ora selefteri zoi parasara da chronia sklavaya kefilaki. Better to live 1 hour of freedom than 40 years in slavery and in jail. Another one was Alexandros Ypsilantis, Athanasius Yakos. I want you to know that they, some of these heroes met an untimely death in the hands of the Turks as martyrs. And of course, what revolution doesn't need martyrs to rally the gang around? The field of main battles was in the Peloponnese, as I mentioned, and it's there that Jews also gave their blood. Only in 1880 did my home city of Volos and Thessaly come under Greek jurisdiction. The wars of the Balkan Wars of 1912 sort of extended Greece some more. And then only in 1947, with the Dodecanese Islands, that's the islands in southeastern Aegean, were turned over to Greece by Italy. And that's where today we have the Greek state, the dimensions of the Greek state. As we contemplate the near and even distant Greek future, there are challenges to address. As I mentioned, the Greek youth is voting with their feet, going away. The brain drain is a real problem. We said democracy is still fragile, not only in Greece, but now we know since January 6th in America. Famine, terrorism has sometimes gripped Greece. Our beloved Greece, much changed from its new tentative beginnings 200 years ago, a country evolving, seeking its place in the world of the 21st century, more open to change, yet cautious, even fearful of it, even demands it, but it's inexorable. We abroad, that is the Greek Jews and Greeks in general, congratulate Greece, even as I end with a hope and expectation now voiced by responsible semi-official sources that Greek Jewry may yet have another dimension to join in shaping happiness. In fact, two. And I mentioned one in the tremendous breakthrough of Pfizer chairman or chief executive officer Albertos Bourlas, who is fast disseminating the production of his Pfizer anti-COVID vaccine. He just yesterday was present with Benjamin Netanyahu, who wanted to offer his parents his congratulations to Bourlas for his wonderful work. We are still waiting for Greece to do something consistent in that regard. You know, the 200th anniversary would have been celebration, would have been a nice occasion for the Greek state to feature Albertos Bourlas front and center. And of course, we want to see the petition of conscience, an appeal to correct history and heal hearts that will eliminate the stigma the blasphemy to that Greek diplomacy perpetrated in 1947 erased. I want to conclude with a few aphorisms. One is liberal. You know, there is a fixation, even a fetish that Greeks have against the idea of liberalism and liberals. And it comes to mind this phrase: if at 18 you are not liberal, you have no heart. He who is liberal at 70 has no head. What does that mean? Do you want to be illiberal? Illiberal means to be close-minded. And Greece has been close-minded too long. It hasn't been open to the world, and it has been open to study, unlike our ancients, who, of course, said an unexamined life is not worth living. The other thing that comes to mind is a kind of, what did I put it? The anecdote that I had, and it's repeated every time I go to Greece. And of course, I go there because my mother-in-law is still living at 97. And my ketubah says, Asher, you must visit to see how you treat our daughter. So I go there often to check out, to have me stamp with a stamp of approval that I treat their daughter well. Of course, my father-in-law passed away six or 7 years ago, so it's my mother-in-law. And whenever I go, of course, I am welcome in the Jewish community and in the non-Jewish community because they know me, and I give freely of my time in interviews with the local press, etc. But I remember so distinctly, and it bothers me because it is not today's Greece, even though it lives under nominally a democracy. This Jewish leader, Greek leader, approaches me and says, Asher, we follow you, we read you, we admire you, we are proud of you. I said, what are you talking about? He said, what you do in Greece, in New York, gives us such empsychosis. Empsychosis means encouragement. Encouragement, because you are able to say and do things that we cannot. Does anybody fathom this? This is a man living in today's Greece who says we have to live in kind of structured lives. We are not even, we have to be self-checked. And of course, I really revel at the fact that I don't live there. I wish that someday soon that Greece becomes a more palatable, more attractive, more appealing place for Jews. Remember that any country without Jews suffers, or any country that persecutes Jews also suffers. And the great example of America indicates how true those words are. It doesn't mean that anti-Semitism is not here. We have experienced it even in New York, of all places, but it is more pronounced in Greece. In studies of the University of Macedonia, as well as at Yale, repeatedly, Greece is named as the #1 European country in anti-Semitic sentiments. That has to end. That has to end. And it has to end by forthright leadership by the civil society and the religious society. They haven't experienced that yet. They haven't experienced a Vatican Council type of seminar where we will air our differences. I suggested, and I mean it seriously, just as South Africa had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, don't you think that after 2,000 years, don't you think after 200 years, something similar must be begun in Greece among a dialogue, a long established dialogue between Greeks and Jews? Where do we go from here? Thank you. I think, let me stop here to digest it. A lot of meat, not much bones. Please, I'd be delighted to hear your reaction and your comments, your questions.
Well, Asher, I would like to defer to our guest from Los Angeles, Mrs. Cohen, first, ladies first, to see what she would like to say, since she came all the way from Los Angeles to join us.
Well, I speak with Asher ever since we're all of us retired, with my other brother in Maryland on a weekly basis. And he's very open about sharing his views among all our family news. He's very open about sharing his views on what's going on in Greece. So I enjoyed hearing his presentation condensed in 45 minutes, but it was very nice to hear it as a whole. But I'm quite familiar, and he's very good at keeping us posted at what's going on in Greece on a regular basis. So I really do appreciate that.
Asha, can I just mention something? You know, Israel and Cyprus and Greece have got a very close...
Yes, close relationship now.
Connection now, an incredibly close connection. You know, on the political, I've been to Greece quite a few times. I used to use Olympic to go to South Africa, and I always went with the kippah on. I never had any anti-Semitism, and I just found that the people were really very accommodating. And when I told them I was from Israel, I had a very positive response every time that I was there. In fact, I'll just mention on Shabbos, I was walking with my daughter to the show in Athens, and somebody stopped their car and they said Shabbat Shalom. I couldn't believe it. But I've always had a very positive response. And, you know, when you see the Greek Prime Minister and the Cypriot Prime Minister also coming to Israel, and the very close connection that we have now with Greece and Cyprus in many fields, economically and tourism and health-wise, and in many, many different areas, I think it's a positive development.
It is a wonder. It is an irony. It is a contradiction, if you will. It is something that we have to work on, and I am more than willing to be a partner with non-Jewish Greeks to smooth that relationship, and to on the government level to continue to let it grow. Again, as I often do, I mentioned that it is a two-tier relationship. The intergovernmental part is very, very positive, in part because it is also to America's advantage. And it is maybe a little nudge from the Americans, but now it stands on its own, that the bilateral benefits, mutual benefits are obvious, and they do it on their own, sometimes even bringing the junior partner Cyprus in to this. However, if you go to the level of the people, the common people. They are, again, wonderful on a personal level. They're very endearing, very hospitable, but they're also um, they're also taken by by ages, by generations of stereotypes that they make a distinction between you, the individual, and the Jew in the plural. You know, you are different. And somehow I've heard that quite a lot. You are one of us. You are one of us. I remember being in the Cypriot consulate during the tenure of Kula Sofianou, a beautiful lady who since then has served as ambassador to Spain, and now is back in the foreign service in Nicosia. And she was in New York, and I was invited, as I frequently am invited to Greek and Cypriot events. And I heard a lecture, and the speaker inevitably, but unexpectedly, veer off to some tropes that made me uncomfortable, whereupon very carefully and unobtrusively withdrew and started to walk out. Don't you think that this consul general came after me running and said, please, Professor, don't leave us. Don't leave us. Please forgive this ranting, this rant. It's you are part of us. You're part of, you know, and I just embraced it, and I said, okay, Kulam, and I went back, you know. Another example, I was the chair for a few years, 10 years ago, apropos of the mandate that was passed by the UN General Assembly in the beginning of 2007, I believe, mandating that nations observe Holocaust Day remembrance on January 27, the liberation of Auschwitz, as you know. So I was approached by a Greek American association from my hometown called Argonauts, and said, Professor, we want you to chair an annual event. I mean, this is unprecedented. Greece to acknowledge A, the Holocaust, and B, to hold such an observance. So I readily agreed, and we had a wonderful, wonderful turnout. I was the featured speaker for the inaugural program with the Archbishop, then Archbishop Demetrius, right in the center, John Katsimatidis, the famed mega businessman, and the who's who of Greek American society. The place was filled to capacity. My mother was there, may she rest in peace. And everything went well the first year. The second year, by the way, on that first year, I said it all in Greek. And when at the end of the program, it was to conclude the program, the Archbishop, His Eminence, came to speak. He took the floor and said, listen to this again, backhand compliment, but I don't know, am I being too sensitive? He said, look at this man. He speaks fluent Greek. You heard a lecture in Greek, meaning for a Greek Jew, this is not bad, you know. He wanted to encourage the other Greeks present to teach their children to learn to speak Greek correctly. I was born there. I lived there. I went to school there. Of course, I would speak Greek, you know. But at any rate, the first year, the second year, the third year was the break year. What happened? I asked Rabbi Dr. Bruce Ginsburg of the nearby Young Sons of Israel Synagogue in Woodmere to also come and give a few remarks. And he was very gracious, speaking about my work and about the reconciliation of Greeks and Jews. Suddenly, it fell on me to make a few remarks as the chairman, the chair of the event. And I began by saying, can we, by the way, this was in English only, because we had Rabbi Ginsburg and a few others who did not speak Greek. So I said, Adelphia, brothers and sisters, we are together. We can let our hair down. We can be candid, can we? I asked that rhetorically, thinking that, and they nodded naturally. So I said, let's be plain and let's be open and let's call the name by the name. And can we not, after so many years, do away with the charge of the crucifixion? Can we incorporate Holocaust studies programs in all parochial and also promote such programs in the Greek schools in Greece? Can we do away with the Judas effigy? Can we, and down the list I proceeded. Well, His Eminence took the floor and said, Professor, I was not prepared for such an attack. Of course, I did not intend an attack. It was an open-ended suggestion and recommendation. 2 weeks later, we had the Argonauts Association had an executive board meeting, and I attended naturally. And I was dressed down by one board member who said, Professor, you can demand our alteration of dogma. That's in our system. Whereupon, in dismay and unhappiness, I picked myself up to walk out the door, never to return. I said, you are calling me then a killer. How can we collaborate if I perceive that you see me as the executioner of your Savior? We can't do that. So that's another point that it's very, very difficult. I get a lot of encouragement from a lot of people, even plain people, but nothing will be done unless society is ready to be unorthodox. Can you believe it? To get rid of anachronisms like this. I appreciate it, Leslie. It's a lovely country and I love to visit. But yeah. The moment I land in Greece, I begin to count the time to our departure. Not because I'm going to have an happy time. I have an enjoyable time. On the last day, I am the first to get up, the first to get on the taxi, the first to go to the airport, the first to get on the plane. And I feel a tremendous sigh of relief when we are out of Greek airspace. Now I know that we cannot be called back for some reason for me to be detained.
Sure. I have a comment about, was it the bishop, the archbishop? The one who said, what, you attacked me? What was his name, a bishop, the archbishop?
The archbishop.
Okay, I have something to say to the archbishop, in case you're listening. You have the nerve, the gall, the chutzpah, the theological arrogance for 2,000 years to accuse an entire people of responsibility for a murder, to demand our conversion, to the point where Asher says that his father told him, Asher, you have to know why the family saved you, so that if we were dead, they would bring you up. You wouldn't even know you're Aristotle or something, right. And you would be lost to us. And this sinner has the nerve to say to you, You are attacking me. They no longer know the difference between left and right or good and bad. Everything is upside down and inside out. What you were was the little boy saying to the Greek Orthodox emperor, you have no clothes. You've had no clothes for centuries. Going back to John Chrysostom, you're so doped up on your Jew hatred, you don't even know the difference. And if a Jew dares to question that, how? It's like Oliver Twist, the little boy at the beginning in the movie, in the book, saying, please, sir, may I have more? Another bowl of more, he wants more. How dare he ask for more? We have a situation where as the prophet Isaiah says, woe to those who call good evil and evil good. The victim of your theological persecution, defamation, there are no words for it, has the nerve to stand up and say, I want you to stop torturing and terrorizing us. And he says, how can you threaten me? So I say to them, woe unto you, scribes, Pharisees, and hypocrites. The scribes, Pharisees, and hypocrites who know the letter of the law, not the spirit of the law, that's you. That's the doctors of your churches. Most Jews won't talk like that, but I think a little bit differently because I have family members who were in the Nazi German Wehrmacht. So my Jew think is a little bit different from the average Jew. And I will say things that the average Jew might not say. I'm surprised that lightning didn't strike from heaven and wipe you all out. Because when you attack the Jew, what you're really attacking is the God of the Jews. When you hate the Jew, you're really hating the God of the Jews. When you say the Jew hates Jesus, what you really mean is, I can't say that. I hate him. I hate his God. I hate my life. The world's life's a bitch. And look at it. Theft, murder, and rape. Sickness, aging, and death, poverty, war. But I can't say that. I'm supposed to be saved, but I'm not. I'm mean and cruel and vicious, but I can't say that. So I project that all onto the Jew as an individual of people, and I sprinkle myself with holy water. You're not holy at all. Now, having said that, there were individual Greeks who did save their Jewish neighbors. Queen Alice, the mother of Philip, who just died.
Yes.
The house of Saxe-Coburg Gotha, not Windsor. He came to honor her. Yad Vashem at a ceremony. She got a tree planted. She had the decency to go insane, like Nietzsche did, because she realized how screwed up her world was. Yes, she saved Jews, and after the war, she went crazy. A normal person, that's the trouble with having too many feelings. If you have too many feelings in this world, you end up in the cemetery, the psychiatric ward. But that wasn't a problem for the bishop. You were threatening their 2,000, well, wait a minute, the Greek Orthodox Church has only been around for 1,000 years since the split with the Roman Catholic Church. Right. They all have a problem with this. This is the spiritual Stockholm syndrome on steroids, where if you know anything about Stockholm syndrome, and look it up, right. You know, Asher, but many people don't. With the bank and the robbers, and at the end, the people who were released by the police gave a dinner for their captors. So a Swedish psychologist or psychiatrist analyzed, how is this possible that in the weakness and helplessness of the victim, everything's turned inside out and upside down, so that the rapist, the murderer, the thief, the bully, the coward, the tyrant becomes an object of adoration and worship, which is, you know, this week, I'm going to give you a good week. I'll only beat you up 3 times, not 6 times. I'll only rape you once. You get a day off. In which case, and this is absolutely is burned into the Jewish psyche. I see it all the time, where the murderer, the rapist, the thief, the coward, the tyrant, and the bully is the object of veneration or adoration or awe. And then when someone stands up and says, no, I don't want that anymore, the foot stamps down. Like George Orwell said, what was his vision of the future in 1984? A boot stamping on a human face forever. And the way you deal with that is you rise up like Spartacus did against the Romans, say, okay, I may go down, but you're coming with me, or I'll put you in the hospital. That's the only language bullies, cowards, and tyrants understand. Let's use a more technical term. Narcissistic psychopath and a demonically possessed narcissistic psychopathic Satanist and what's masochist and what's the other word, masochist and the one who sadist, don't stop themselves. Don't ask them for their pity or their mercy. As Churchill said, never give in, never give in, never back down to tyrants and bullies, no matter how powerful they may appear. I know I'll conclude my remarks about this. My father had a law practice in the ghetto, El Barrio. You're a New Yorker, South Bronx, 3rd Avenue, 149th Street, from 1952. And he said in his neighborhood, even if you're a little old lady, if someone isn't on drugs and crazy and they just want to steal a pocketbook, if they sense or smell, you're going to fight back. The shark will choose another tuna. It's not worth my trouble. You're going to give me trouble. So as I swim along, if they smell blood, if you radiate help, you're in trouble. And when Jews do that, it's not like Blanche Dubois in A Streetcar Named Desire. I've always depended on the kindness of stranger. That is not a very good policy. Don't depend on the kindness of strangers. And especially for Jews. Well, and you see this also in the Israeli reaction to the world response to 4,300 missiles, rockets being fired at the land of Israel. Like, well, won't you feel sorry for us? No. Well, I'll show you photos. No, we blame you too. Oh, but won't you be nice to us? Won't you have pity for us? That doesn't earn you respect or pity. That just earns you the very contempt of the very murderer who wants to murder you as he murders you. That doesn't earn Jews the respect of Gentiles, including the worst ones. Goebbels wrote in his diary about the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, the Jews showed what they could do. What? Because we fought back for a few weeks with virtually no weapons? Okay, yeah, we showed what we could do. So what you're talking about, what you did with the bishop, the archbishop, is you know what you did? Like in Snow White, when Snow White says to the mirror, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the most beautiful of them all? And the mirror said, Snow White, your majesty. But in your case, the archbishop looks in the mirror and says, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the most murderous, vicious, miserable Christ killer of all? Yourself, your majesty. They can't handle that. That is why I started my monthly seminar, From Gospel to Gas Chamber, History of Holocaust and Jew Hatred. Because one, I have the academic background for it. And two, I don't put any varnish or mascara on dead bodies like at an Irish wake in the funeral.
But
that's my task. And I don't deal with why Israeli government representatives or establishment Jewish organizational representatives do or don't deal with it. For whatever reason, I'm dealing with it. So that was my long comment on the Archbishop's response to you, where instead of saying his people, you know, you made a good point, we have to think about that, we really need to repent because we see what happened in the Holocaust. No, like the Evangelische Kirche Deutschlands in Germany, the state Protestant church, in 1946, 1 year later, not now when people can say, well, it didn't happen, it sort of happened, Holocaust denial and distortion, it was too fresh then, said a year later, 1946, we call upon the Jews to cease their ongoing crucifixion and rejection of Christ. The Holocaust was your punishment for the murder of our Savior. And they don't realize that's satanic because they're the very ones who did it, or their family members did it, or their fathers or their sons, or maybe their daughters and their nieces as guards at Auschwitz. Everything's upside down. That's all I wanted to say about your lovely Archbishop. Having said that, many times there are all the good people in Greece who did risked their lives to save Jews for whatever reason, including thinking they could get you if you're, but they did give you back to your parents. Many times Jews were not given back to their parents by the monasteries and convents. So that's all I had to say on that. So, and we welcome Dr. Yitzhak Kerem, who is now joining us for the program. So I'm going to mute my mic now.
I want to also note this obsession that Greeks have, and I guess it's common to the Middle East and Turkey and all those, and that is the obsession with with saving face. This notion that somehow you are less than a man, because man is of course the object of veneration in any event, by admitting that perhaps you err, that you know, to err is human, you know, and to seek mercy is divine. But no, they insist on rectitude even when it is against their interests. You know, one of the things that the elder Bush was accused of by Margaret Thatcher was not to be wimpish, you know, not to be wimpish when facing Saddam Hussein in the first Iraq war. And of course he didn't. He went through with it, and we got rid of him eventually. But I like to say in my own classes, undergraduate classes, that, and it bears repeating here, that the greatest contribution in American jurisprudence was made by those 55 men in that summer of 1787 in Philadelphia, when they managed to get out a document of unique Goldberg type working condition, but based on the C word. Professor, what do you mean by C? Compromise. Compromise is not being wimpish and not being weak. It is, in fact, the basis of strength. You get what you can now, and you negotiate more for later and later and later, because that's the nature of give and take and democracy, discussion, negotiation. This is unknown to Greeks because most of their lives, they did not live under that kind of mentality. It was all or none. Better than this phrase that has come down to haunt them, and that is the Megali idea, Megali idea. Megali idea, it means the great idea, the big idea. And what is the big idea? Do you know? To this day, they live with this notion. Because as Greek Jews, we cannot share, I cannot share in this make-believe structure. The Megali idea is to one day see Greece reconstitute itself as an empire. That means Asia Minor. That means Constantinople. That means Izmir. That may mean even some of the conquests of Alexander the Great, not only in Macedonia and North Macedonia, but in the Middle East. No wonder that they refuse to adopt the new nomenclature for these places. They will not use the word Izmir for Smyrna. They will not use the new word Istanbul for Constantinople, because to concede that, to concede language, would be to concede the great idea, the Megali idea. And that is a painful reality they cannot abide. By the way, of course, the new empire, Greek empire, will not be Athenian. You know, it's amazing. They talk about Athenian democracy, which, by the way, did not exist ideally at all. It had some elements, but it had slavery, for example. It had no women in the democracy. But at any rate, there, the seat of power in a new reconstituted Greek empire would be Constantinople, and the big church of Hagia Sophia do not recognize the fact that a new sovereign power is in control of those lands, and they have Erdogan, not a man not to be admired by any stretch of the imagination and to be condemned, has converted intentionally the church, not from what it had been for a long time, a museum, into a mosque in order to throw the ashes to Greek eyes. That's what we are living with. The big idea. What do you say, Yitzhak? Chime in.
And I, yeah, well, recently I
By the way,
was in
this
an
is my sister Rachel from LA, in case you did not.
glad to meet you. So recently I was in an unusual event of Jesuits and Jews. Jesuits actually talking, negating the classical Catholic doctrine and absolving the Jews from responsibility and from their blemish that they didn't have racial purity or blood purity. And but the point is that here, even though every religious doctrine is divine and absolute, you have a change, you have a shift. The shift wasn't yesterday. It was probably 350 years ago. And the Eastern Orthodox, Greek Orthodox Church doesn't, like Asher said, they don't want to make a compromise. Their theology and their doctrine is holy, it's absolute. And even, the Jews, we believe in Sinai, but we don't have, but we have different shades of halakha, and, there's 70 different phases of halakha, et cetera. But even under strict Orthodox, you have very different interpretations. You can take a very strict position, and you can have a mekel, a very easing, flexible position. But the official Greek Orthodox Church doesn't want that. So the Megali Ve is also not just the empire, but it's the religious Eastern Orthodox, Greek Orthodox empire. Okay, yeah. So obviously they're living in the past. Okay, it's not going to be. And in the end of World War I, it was ridiculous to try this. And what was ludicrous, it was the Republican Venizelos, the modern European guy, who wanted to reinstate this escapade, as opposed to the more traditional royalists.
Yeah.
And it was a fiasco. And then worse comes to what was worse. It ended up in a huge massacre of Greek Orthodox in Izmir in Asia Minor. And but even today, I've said it a few times, but it falls on deaf ears, that the Greek Orthodox Church, they don't want a dialogue. Okay, they're afraid of the other denomination. Okay, they're afraid of losing what they have, their monopoly in the East, which no one knows about, but we know about it. Okay, they have a certain monopoly in the Eastern Mediterranean, and a little bit in Northeastern Africa, but essentially, Bartholomew is a much more rational, and he's less doctrinaire, but obviously Archbishop and all sorts of clerics in Athens are much more doctrinaire. They're in their, they're like in a, they're like in a pre-Vatican a pre-Vatican Greek Orthodox church, okay, but in the larger sense, in the capital C, in a larger sense of the word. In other words, they're trying to preserve an old church doctrine, which of course is it's not obsolete. They have their followers, and they have their followers in the diaspora. It'll be trite to say it's anti-modern, but it's a strong theological current, which, from our perspective, is obviously anti-Semitic, which is theologically antagonistic. Okay, so on one hand, we can each pat each other on the back, the Greek Orthodox here and there, save the Jews in the Holocaust, et cetera, but the Greek Orthodox world doesn't want to enter serious dialogue because they don't want to hear from this. They're afraid of their rival Orthodox groups stabbing them. They don't want to have any contact with Protestants or Catholics. Okay, and
You know
the
what
Jewish,
they call
world with a funny establishment like the World Jewish Congress, American Jewish Congress, is just like, hey, that's nice. Let's get together and hear each other. And then the Archbishop makes a phony talk about, commonality, and whitewashes the issues, which Asher obviously talked about. And but for us, for Israel, it's a vacation place, Greece, and for Greece, it's an ally to offset Turkey in their rhetoric or whatever.
What you say about fearing their Christian blood brothers is absolutely on target. You know that I repeatedly come across in the Astoria neighborhood people who dismiss more than 1 billion Roman Catholics by calling them simply heretical. They're heretics. They're heretics, I say. You do not want to be like them in terms of re-examining dogma and bringing it up to date to be more inclusive, more collaborative, more cooperative with other religions? No.
No, right. I mean, that's part of their dogma. They're dogmatic in defending an ancient theology which they won't give any legitimacy for flexibility. Okay? So they're very traditional, though the religious believers, okay. But in terms of us, which really is an important point, since we're really talking about the nitty-gritty issues, they are theologically anti-Jewish. They have this very vicious anti-Jewish stain. You have to be very sophisticated to get that out of them, okay? Because they'll be apologetic, and it's not nice for them to tell you that the Jew is their scapegoat, okay? And the average person won't detect this. But if you're in an all Greek crowd and they didn't pay attention that you're not, that you're Jewish or something else, they'll freely, rant, and as if the Jews are responsible for every problem they have, every organizational problem, which we have no conception of whatsoever. But that's part of their vivre d'etre, okay? And so I think if there was some interdenominational dialogue, a lot of this could be rehashed. Obviously, the church is afraid of theological challenges, but from our perspective, that's not good. They're still strong with their main base of followers, but I think for the long run, even though Greece is a confused little country and their diaspora is hardly felt, in the total equation of Eastern Europe, it's a big issue, because this is where the outbursts and the genocides come. Okay, so Greece hasn't been antagonistic since Cyprus, since the dictatorship in Greece, and then the attempt in Cyprus, but they are antagonistic in defense of Eastern Orthodoxy in the Balkans. Okay, so we saw that in the 90s. There's no questioning in Greece about Serbia's behavior. There's no questioning that the Eastern Orthodox, the Proboslavians, have to get back at the Catholics in Croatia, or they have to get back at the Muslims in Bosnia. Okay, and these are dangerous things because we actually, things simmer down, but after the siege of Sarajevo, there Muslim fundamentalism was on the rise, and it was exacerbated by the most dangerous fundamentalist streams in the Muslim world, which you all can guess who they are. Okay, and that sort of died down, but all this is extremely explosive. So if you're an American and a Northern European, you don't give a hoot, you don't care. Okay, but for the Balkans, this is volatile, and it'll happen again. All right, we always think nothing's going to happen. You know, it's like everything is la-di-da, and life goes on. There's some economic problems, but
Well, the 1389 defeat of the Muslims by the Serbs is still commemorated to this day. And
right, and that the symbol of Kosovo.
Yeah, Kosovo.
For example, that's a very, very powerful symbol in the Balkans. So what Asher was talking about, every regime undoes the previous regime. So Erdogan, even though he's an extremist fundamentalist, that's typical, though, of the Ottomans erasing the Byzantine Christian past and vice versa. So the Byzantines erased pagan past. They erased even a bit of a Crusader Catholic past, but and for sure the Jewish, they wiped out. They didn't want any sign of Jews or someone questioning their theology. But so all this, it's like a volcano, the Balkans. Okay, so for us, for most people, it's a non-issue. Well, what is Greece? What is Serbia? It's like, what is Bulgaria? It's like, but just like in the 90s, and this is part of Orientalism, a delineation of the East. Okay, the West just passes all this off. So there can be genocides, and all your Jappy Holocaust institutes and museums won't relate because it's the East. They just can't relate. Everything is a PR campaign in Western terms. So even though this is Europe, but if you're really looking acutely, it's the east of the Europe. Obviously it's the residue of the Ottoman Empire. It's the residue of religious conflicts which don't happen anymore in Western Europe. There's no conflict between Alsace and Germany anymore. But in the Balkans, these things exist. So tomorrow, we'll be surprised, but Bulgaria could attack Macedonia. Albania could try to make a run for Greece. And all these things.
You know that there was a big issue with the name of Macedonia. You know, the big issue. In the treaty that ended the Balkan Wars, Macedonia, the original great Alexander the Great area, was divided into three parts: a small part to Bulgaria, a small part to what eventually became Macedonia, independent after the breakup of Yugoslavia, and the largest part went to Greece. Comes the Tsipras government, and they want to end the kind of false narrative that Macedonia doesn't exist, but only as the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. So they said, okay, after protracted negotiations, they settled to the obvious thing. Let's call it North Macedonia. Well, there was hell to pay in the Greek press that continues to this very day. By removing this as an issue, they said, no, the Greek government betrayed the great cause of Greece. He betrayed our ancestors. No, you're giving cause for the North Macedonians to become, are you ready for this word? Irredentist. They really have in back of their minds their extension into Greek Macedonia, taking that over in order to find a way out to the sea by taking over Salonika. I mean, the brains are really sick, and this is what.
But all this is latent. Well, it all happened. It all happened in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, and
There you
if
go.
you let them get
Now I'm back.
again, if you let them get away with it, they'll do it again. Okay, and this is on the agenda. It's going to happen again.
That's where the word balkanized comes in. Yeah,
Bye,
everybody
Rachel.
is on turf, you know.
All right. Unfortunately, I got to go. I have to chair a session in Champaign-Urbana in 20 minutes, and then give a lecture in the next section after that. So, Asher,
It's good to
you were-
see you, Yitzhak.
you were enlightening as usual. I came late, but I
I
don't think I
read
missed
everything
it.
you send me. Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Sure.
Rachel, this is what Leslie and Lowell have been able to bring us all together for
Excellent.
stimulation.
Excellent.
I didn't realize, Asher, that Rachel was your sister at the beginning until you mentioned it later on in the program. Were you both born in Greece? I mean, I know, Asher, you were born in Greece.
She was
Rachel,
born in 52 after the war. She was
You
4 years
you just outed me. Now everybody knows how old I am.
how young you are. I just turned 65 years young, and our older daughter just had her third Israelite warrior
Tell her the name.
princess.
Tell her the name.
Her name, she was named today in the Chabad of Abu Tur synagogue, and her name is Miriam Martha. And I was strictly told by my Eshet Chaya, you're not supposed to mention the name to anyone, even out loud at home, until the naming. Well, that was this morning at 10:35 a.m. Well, 9:35 a.m. So now I can do that. Rachel doesn't know, Asher, that our two girls had their naming on Broome Street in the Kehilat Kedoshei Yanana on New York's Lower East Side. Have the certificates, because in the 4 years that we lived there, when we discovered the jewel of the synagogue, we went on Shabbat. And that's where I learned for Kiddush, you didn't have schmaltz, herring, and schnapps. You had uzu and feta cheese and olives. And here, when I meet people and they show me
Burekas, don't forget the burekas.
burekas, yes.
And the burekas.
They show me arak. I said, yes, that's called uzu. How did you know? Well, because I went to Kilat Kedoshei Yanana. There is a sister synagogue here, but it's quite far from us in Machane Yehuda. I visited it, but they have a sister synagogue here. So my mother actually has a piece of stained glass. She made it's on permanent display there. As you come up the steps, as you come in, it's on permanent display on the right-hand side before the steps lead up to the ladies section. I mentioned a long time ago, I haven't done it yet, to send Asher photos of that, which I have from when we visited, when were we there? I was there in June 2019. And then I was there again with my wife in November, December 2019, and Marvin came on by train across the bridge to open up the synagogue for us, to show it to us. And there's Sally. I remember meeting Sally. I mean, I know Sally from 30 years ago, and he was there. The neighborhood, I think, looks wonderful in terms of what Asher mentioned about good multiculturalism. Well, when you have Chinese as your neighbors, you know what that means, because everywhere the Chinese go, It's just devastation blossoms into restaurants and little Buddhist churches and Christian churches and laundromats and dry cleaners, and the tongues and the triads see that the people who are you wouldn't want to have on your street disappear rather quickly. So yes, I remember it very well. I remember it very well. So Asher, I don't know if Les is there. Les, are you there?
I don't know.
Les is on I saw that Les was at the train station going home because he's a dentist. And sometimes he works later there. So he's probably in transit and unable to communicate, even though his mic, even though he's there, but I don't think he's there. So since we're coming to the conclusion of our first seminar, I would like to ask you to talk about, I don't think you can talk about it too much. It's a story that should be told over and over again, how you were saved in the cave in 1943. This is a remarkable story. It should be book series, a movie series, TV series of how a Nazi, I don't know if he was in the SS or just the regular German army, saved your
Probably
family.
the regular army, probably, I think. But it did not matter because the result would have been the same. They were tasked with rounding up all the Jews, period. What they did to them after was a question mark. Instant execution, separation of young children from parents, maybe donating the children to childless Germans, who knows what, you know, your imagination can run rampant.
Well, since you mentioned that, and my son-in-law is from Poland,
Yeah.
And this gets back to a subject that we discussed in my own seminar is what do people believe and to what extent will they act on their beliefs? How, and I keep telling this to Jews and Israelis, it doesn't matter how weird it seems to us. Let's say Satanism. Is there a Satan, a demon? I don't know, but they believe, if someone believes that and say, okay, gee, let's have a child sacrifice, and they do it, it doesn't matter whether it exists out of their minds, they'll act on that. So in Poland, the Germans rounded up about 200,000 children. I mean, the Slavs have blonde hair and blue eyes too. I don't see what their problem, but they, according to whatever crazy criteria they had, they kidnapped children that they felt looked like Nordic, Teutonic, Aryan blonde-haired, blue-eyed children, not Slavic blonde-haired, blue-eyed children. They stole them, didn't kill them. They said, you're really Germans, even though you're these Poles. We're going to bring you back to the Reich and raise you as proper Germans, and you can become soldiers for the Fuhrer. Again, as crazy as that sounds to us, they acted on those policies. Another policy they acted on, and then we'll get back to what you when the Nazi armies plunged into southern Russia, like in the spring and summer of 1942, they encountered Karaites. The Karaites community still existed 1,000 years later. And the Karaites said, we're not Jews. The Nazis said, you're not Jews, you've been separated them for 1,000 years. Okay, and they didn't kill them. So they took their own Mishigas seriously. They could have said, well, when in doubt, kill them all. Nope. You're Karaite, and there was a big fight between the regular Jewish communities and the Karaites after World War II, where the regular Jews, us, said, well, you betrayed us. They didn't actually betray us. They saved themselves by saying, well, we're not Jews. We're Karaites. We split off with them 1,000 years ago. And not just, okay, and then kill them. So would you say something about this remarkable encounter with this angel of death who became an angel of life in the cave?
Yeah.
Could you tell that story again?
You don't want me to wait until next month? Okay.
Yeah, you can tell it again. Then, in fact, I think you could tell it. You can't tell a story like that too much. And most people don't listen anyway. So you have to repeat things 100 times for them to listen once. Go ahead.
Thank you. you know, I get the individual stories from Hidden Child, the association from the ADL of the Claims Conference. You know, it's about still survivors of the Holocaust who are dribbling now out to tell the stories. And everyone is unique in itself, and yet part of the Jasal, the entire. So mine is in that kind of framework that, but for the grace of God, as I said, those three people, two of whom were religious leaders, one Christian, one Jewish, and the unlikely contribution of a German officer of the state, you know, the government, a consul general in Volos, who must have had a warm heart and a caring heart to go to the to his collaborators and inform them what the Reich had in store for the Jews of Volos, which was not unlike what they did already, what they perpetrated to the Jews of Salonika earlier. So in desperation, they immediately managed to get the word out and to urge their flock, in the case of the Christian metropolitan, his flock, to take care of as many Jews as possible. Some heeded his advice and his mandate. Others took advantage of the situation to benefit in some way. But in any event, a couple that was childless, Froso and Yorgos Stamos, came to my parents. I was yet to be born, and urged them to follow them to the mountains where they had possession of some land and some livestock and rudimentary shelter, very primitive shelter. They follow. In desperation, you try to do the best you can. And it was there on a very cold, very snowy, very dim Erev Hanukkah, 1943, that I was born with the help of a midwife who traversed very heavy snow from a neighboring village to come and help my mother deliver a baby. And there we existed for a few weeks until when we were hearing every time that there were raids by German troops to lower in case villages, but eventually they were coming slowly up to the top. And other young families cried. And not only they cried, the parents cried, but the children cried, only to tragically betray their parents, and by exposing them to the Germans. Other young families suppress the cries of their newborn, only to find that after the danger passed, so had the life snuffed from the child. Apparently, I don't know, again, I wonder what was in store for me, because years later, decades later, my mother would, with no prompting, would say, you know, Asher, I'm looking at you. You have developed into some kind of proud Jew and proud citizen, etc. But you actually saved us. I said, Mom, calm. What are you talking about? What saved you? You made possible for us all to exist. How did I was a baby. I did not carry a gun or resist. No, but by keeping silent, the Germans passed by and left us alone. Yet there came a time when some inquisitive German discovered our hiding place. With guns drawn, they marched into the makeshift shelter. My father was absent during daylight hours, doing whatever he could for the resistance. So it was this nativity scene of mother and child that could have been the end of us. Instead, as he was the head of patrol, as he was looking around, he passed the makeshift crib, looked down, saw a smiling baby, and right there, he must have thought, I'm a young father myself. I left a baby in Hamburg. Get out. Rouse, rouse. Never to bother us again. You know, every time I repeat the story, chills go up and down my spine. But for the grace of God, who knows where I would be, if I would be anywhere. So, never mind the fact that they entered into an unholy agreement with my parents to take me in case my parents did not survive the Holocaust, baptize me, and become their heir. I would have a sweet life. Never mind that after the war, we did survive intact. And they insisted that I should be given to them as a prize because my parents would have other children like Rachel and Daniel. And they refused, only to be settled by the issue to be settled by the same metropolitan who spirited the Jews off to the mountains, who said, Madam, it's okay for you to reside here and the Matathias to reside a few blocks away, and the natural mother to occasionally see, and more than occasionally, spot her son, never to be able to interact. No, 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 no. Give that boy back to the lawful mother. And that's how. And for a long time, they did not speak to one another. Eventually, they reconciled. And miracle of miracles, in 1970, that couple, that very couple, I did not know all of the details that I'm telling you now. That very couple was invited to my wedding in 1970.
And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce the presenter for today's program.
The last time that I saw them. And ever since then, I am in contact with their adopted son, who now has his own grandchildren. And I remind him that but for the grace of God, 50% of all the things that he possesses and he claims and he is proud of would have been mine. And he nods and says, you're right, Asher. Well, it didn't turn out that way. And good it didn't. Any question?
Well, Ash, and that actually, it's now almost 9 p.m.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I hope I never get tired of listening to that story. I mean, especially because there's so much bad news in the world. We have to keep repeating to ourselves the good news.
Yes.
And you can't repeat it too much. So what less I can see is there, but he's not there. So I will do what he usually does. I'll conclude the program. And I see my recording has not been interrupted. So I want to thank, on behalf of our viewers and listeners, and our live Zoom studio audience, which has come in and come out as we've gone along, I would like to thank Professor Asher Matathias Zorba the Jew for sharing, hosting, and speaking at our first monthly seminar on Greek Jewry through the ages. Looking forward to our next seminar. Again, we are broadcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. Rachel Cohen Professor Matathias'
Thank
sister
you.
is
It was
participating
wonderful. It was
Lo-
very enjoyable. Thank you.
from Los Angeles.
That's the company I keep. You know, this is the company I keep.
Los Angeles, the Angels. The Angels, Los Angeles. And
Yes.
Professor Matathias near JFK Airport in Long Island. So today is Monday, June 7th, 2021. Now that it's the nighttime, it's the 28th of Sivan 5781. So I wish everyone a good week from
A
Jerusalem.
good week. Shavuot Tov. Thank you,
And
Shavuot Tov. Shavuot
see,
Tov.
Lowell. Be well.
thank you. Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.